Uh-oh, it's working.
There he is. Okay, great.
What's up?
What's up? The
How you?
lighting, I was saying the lighting in that room is so good. You're sitting in front of your painting.
Yes, the lighting just went blue for a second.
No, it looks really, really good.
Okay, yeah.
So, yeah, it looks great.
First in the series of the Shoe Blossom series, the first one, the AJ1 blossomed.
Okay, we're going to talk all about it. So this is Story and Rain founder Tamara Rappa. I'm here with Shane Ward, shoe designer, creative director, and artist. We're just talking about your art. So tell us a little bit, let's talk about what's behind you.
Yes, this is, I would say probably 20 years in the making. It's the first painting I've done in 20 years. I've always had this fascination with the arts and other forms of creativity out of designing shoes. And, you know, when the shutdown happened, I decided that I wanted to make sure that I dictated the story that was going to eventually be told of my existence in it. And with that, you know, I felt all of the anxiety like everyone else, fear and uncertainty. But once I turned that corner, I decided to jump into the writing and also painting. So I went through a bunch of old school sketches that I put together of what I could potentially paint. And as you know, as a creative, you know, it's one thing to design a product for a specific audience, specific demographic, but when you're doing something like self-expression piece of art. So I kept coming back to this little sketch that I did of a shoe. Actually, if you don't mind, if I'll show you the first sketch. It was in the sketchbook, and it was this little sketch here, and it was, as you can see, of a huge stiletto heel embellished with cherry blossoms. I just kept coming.
So that's how this series evolved from being about a stiletto shoe.
Yes, yes.
And then how'd you make that pivot to like, I've got to cover sneakers here. I've got to.
So when I kept coming back to the sketch of the stiletto, it felt almost expected to have the cherry blossom embellished on it.
100%. Yeah.
Right? And I think that I'm inspired.
You felt like you've seen it before.
Yes, exactly. And as we spoke on the podcast, I'm inspired by things that are juxtapositions, maybe creations that I've never seen before. I never thought of myself. And so I wanted to create something that was a little bit more unexpected and something that was a little bit more disruptive. And so I kind of went all the way back to how I started in the industry when I was a shoe designer at Adidas or Adidas. And so I went back to sneakers, and then I started thinking about, okay, maybe I could paint a sneaker embellished, you know, a sneaker that's, you know, it embodies competitiveness and aggressiveness. And then you have the juxtaposition of these super delicate and ethereal petals of a cherry.
Is that why you picked cherry blossoms, just because of how delicate the flower is, or was there deeper symbolism there?
It's definitely deep. It took me a while to understand why I drew cherry blossoms on the sketch, but I've always been fascinated with Japanese culture.
Yes.
And that goes back to myself and my siblings. We all lived in Japan with my mother and my stepfather when I was 5 years old on an Air Force base in Yokota Air Base. And so, and I've been traveling there quite a bit for inspiration trips.
Yes, we talk about this on the podcast.
Yes.
Your love of Japan.
You can't think about, you know, Japanese culture and fashion and their taste level without even talking about the beginnings and ends and all of the different symbolism that cherry blossoms embody. So I think it was something totally unconscious. I just drew them. It just came out of my hand, and then I had to kind of go on that journey of
why that happened. That's so interesting.
Cherry blossoms came out. So that's how I ended up with the sneakers and eventually the Air Jordan 1, because I wanted it to be something, the story to be something bigger than myself and me, Shane, as a shoe designer at Adidas. But my journey would not be what it was if it wasn't for my true inspiration and my creative influence and my mentor, Peter Moore, who used to be the designer at Nike, who designed Air Jordan 1, the actual wing logo and the Jumpman logo. He was my creative director at Adidas
It's
when I
incredible.
first job out of college. And so I
Yeah.
wanted to pay, homage to his legacy and then combine that with everything else I was thinking about at the same time.
We actually have a question, so I'll jump ahead to this question. We have a question. We gathered some really good questions from both men and women. And so Rick is asking on this topic, is it important to have a mentor in this line of work, and do you have one?
Absolutely. I think it's imperative to have at least one mentor. You could have more than one mentor, but at least one. And especially in our industry, and in design in general, to have someone that's been through the journey before and can just help you navigate all the ebbs and flows, all the nuances of the business aspect of the industry, not only just the creative side of things. But there isn't one instance where I've created some type of brand deck or some new innovative idea that I conjured up without reaching out to my mentor, just because
Wow.
it allows me to see the opportunity and the design and the concept in a 360-degree way, step away from it a little bit. Sometimes we become so insulated with our ideas, and our settings, our home, our office. We need someone from the outside to look in and ask you some of those provocative questions that you wouldn't ask yourself. And then a mentor will put you in check.
Well, that's interesting. Like, what are the kinds of things that he would say to you? Like, what's it? Can you give an example of how, yeah, you're sort of alone with your ideas, and if you don't have sounding boards and you don't kind of expose them on some level, you're not going to see the idea in that 360 way. But can you recall like some of the things that he's like opened your eyes up to, or I don't know?
Yeah. So as of late, this example happened not too long ago. So I'm the creative director for GH Bass, and I put together a brand deck called Reimagine. And the entire idea was to look through the lens of a brand that's been around for 150 years. But then how does that personify manifest itself in today's environment where there's a huge sneakerification of footwear going on, and there's also sustainability. So I put together this brand deck, and then I put together concepts. And I kind of went all the way in. And before I presented it to the team, I reached out to Peter and I asked him to look at it. And it was true to his style and his methodology. Shane, what does the brand mean? How was it founded? What's the name of the founder? What was his mission? And it really just stopped me.
Yeah, you're like, oh, I forgot. Right, that core information. Right?
Yeah, core information. Like none of this story or these ideas exist without of who founded the company and what their mission was.
Yeah.
Right there is the ultimate credibility and the ultimate building blocks of putting together a mission. So that's when I kind of all the way up, and then found out that Bass was not just about regions and the penny loafer. I mean, it was built on product. And so it was eye-opening, but it's like so simple, right?
Yeah, very simple, but it's an easy thing to maybe overlook if you're so close to an idea or project, right?
Yeah. And then as creatives, we always want to go. We want to create this, and we want to be up front. And that's what Peter was able to do.
We have a question from Dave. Can you list all the technical skills and otherwise that you feel is needed in order to design the kind of footwear you do? What is required of what kind of, speaking of core, like is there a core skill set for somebody like you?
Absolutely. I'm not even going to bring in kind of a lot of the psych and theoretical approaches. So just skill set. If you think of a toolbox, and what type of tools do you need to become a successful shoe designer? One, you have to have a way to visually communicate your ideas. So before all of the programs were out, like Photoshop, Illustrator, and the 3D, you had to draw. You had to draw pretty well because that was the only way you could visually communicate.
And those are very detailed drawings too. It's not like it's not like drawing like a circle or something abstract.
Right.
It's like incredibly detailed.
Absolutely. There's so many facets of this, drawing a shoe. I mean, the same as designing a car. It's just on a small scale. There's so many different components and materials. So one, you have to have some type of skill set that allows you to communicate your idea, because you're not always there to explain it, whether you send it to partners over in
Right.
Europe or a factory in
That's
Asia.
interesting.
So you have to draw really well, or you have to be able to utilize some of the great programs that are out there right now. So even if you don't have that natural talent to draw, at least you can create your ideas, Illustrator or Photoshop or some of the other programs. So
Yeah.
to me, that's one skill set that's needed. The other skill set that's needed, and I'm going to talk about growth within the industry now, because a lot of things that you learn for shoe design, you learn it through the trade. Right? Like, I didn't have any experience in shoe design when I accepted my job at Adidas college, but I learned all the fundamental skills of drawing and visually communication, getting your ideas, and then you just learn all of the other techniques, whether it be building a blueprint from scratch on a bottom of a shoe, doing cross section. That right there, they're critical tool to have. So you have to be able to think in 3 dimensions. I still draw my cross section and my technical drawing, all the details and millimeters by hand, because I'm old school.
Right.
But
Yeah, I know. Can't shake the old school sometimes, right?
yeah. But I want to throw in this one last little piece of. So those are 2 things: visual communication to being able to do a technical drawing. Last but not least, I think that you have to hone in skills of being able to work with other business units, being someone that is open to discussing other people's ideas and perspectives. As a shoe designer, you're never just going to be in your home creating your designs for an organization and then that's it. You're going to have to work with merchandisers. You're going to have to work with marketing teams, sales teams, and factories. And it's imperative that you have some type of ability or even a willingness to work cross-disciplinary with others and be empathetic, because everyone has an opinion. And if they're experienced, they probably have some good ideas to bring to the table, but more than just yourself to create a great product.
Jane asks a question: what makes someone an asset to your creative team? Speaking of teams.
For me, I look for someone or people that complement my concept, and they think they have a different approach to design than I do. I think it would be detrimental to the creative and personal and growth than to surround yourself with people who think and feel like you do.
Right.
I always to have a spirited debate about a concept and an idea, because that's how we all end up with a really great collection. It's done as a team. So I look for individuals that have complementary skills that I have. So just to give you, an example, I feel like I have the skill and the ability to create a lot of content at any given time. I love to draw. I have tons of ideas that just come splurging out all the time. And a lot of them are bad ideas, but I can fill a wall with.
Right.
But then I have, a designer on my team who takes a much more philosophical approach to design. He does all of his research and he kind of pulls everything, all of his inspiration through a lens and only creates a few ideas. But those few ideas are so well thought out and they become perspectives that I would never have.
Right. That's right.
Right. And I think that's what helps a really strong.
That's a really fun part of the collaboration process. Switching gears for a second, Liz is asking, what's in your own shoe closet?
What's the trip is I post stories and Instagram images and people see me wearing, especially up here, knockoff Crocs with the heel. My closet is not representative of most shoe designers, especially up here. But I would say there's a tons of boots. I'm just going to speak to where I am currently. upstate.
Yeah, boots. Boots is a good big category for you.
Yeah, there are high performance boots that are super waterproof and can go through all the different elements that I can work with gardening or working around the property. So I have tons of boots, but then sneakers are so important just from a comfort level standpoint, and I wear Adidas. I've been loyal
Have to.
since 90. So it's basically boots and sneakers.
Cool.
Hardly any sandals. I'm not a sandal guy.
Yeah, sandals can get weird for guys, I have to say.
Especially with
Shelly, how many rounds of edits are there to a shoe design? And do you work with a set cap off, or do you go until you get it right? Interesting question.
Okay, yes. There's definitely a set cutoff time because we all have to stick to seasonal objectives and milestone meetings and deliverables. So if you're working with the industry, there has to be a stop point. And that's difficult because as creators, we like to keep working, we get it right.
And iterating on things and yeah.
Yes. So yes, there's always a stop point, but then I'm just going to give probably like a Cliff Notes version of the stages. There's usually at least 3 rounds. Now, I could tell you that on average, I probably go through 20, but you have your conceptual day. After you receive a brief from the merchandising team. They'll basically outline a style. Say there's a need for a women's comfort sandal, and that comfort sandal needs to fall in the range of a retail price point of $79, $89. So you already know what type of material.
You have the framework for it.
And so you start creating sketches, and then you usually have your first sketch review. And that first sketch review, I usually like to have amongst designers. Like, let's have our own little internal review before we show the merchandising team. So that's the first stage. Then we give each other feedback. The second stage is when we actually we present the concepts to the entire team. That's when everyone else has input. And then after that, we do a final presentation with detailed material board. We do detailed isometric views, top, side views. It's basically a 2D version of what you eventually will see. So those are and then that is what you eventually send off to the factories to make a prototype.
Someone sent in a question about materials. Gwen, how did you begin to educate yourself about materials? How did that work for you as a young designer? How did you just like get thrown into it and suddenly you had to do, or did you ever take some time to just do a lot of research? How did that work?
It's so interesting. Being a shoe designer is pretty much a trade. Learn everything on the job. When I came out of University of Michigan in 1996, I knew nothing about materials. Leather, synthetic, the different type of textiles.
Yeah, I can imagine. What would you know about materials whatsoever?
Yeah. You come into it as, with a clean slate. You just ask a lot of questions. You make a lot of mistakes. You present ideas that are totally irrational and not reasonable. And so you just end up learning by doing. You eventually, if you're fortunate enough to be at an organization that has a material library and also a creative team. When I say a creative team, I'm talking about a team that their job is to pull together inspirations and trend books for
research teams.
Yeah, like a research team, and that usually
I love the idea of a materials library. That sounds fabulous.
Yeah, that is where I learned everything about materials, is basically through the Adidas material library. I remember being at Rockport, at the same thing, and then we created one at Bass, and that's when you just start flipping through all of the books and you start cutting swatches. And if you're fortunate enough to work with a company that gives you an MX card, you can go out and buy samples of shoes
and play around.
You're interested.
Yeah. Interesting. So somebody else asked, Belinda, where's the best place for shoe material sourcing and why? Is that Italy? I mean, what is that? That's Italy.
Best materials in the world are going to come out of come out of Italy. And then they actually organize a huge trade show. It's a materials convention called Linea Pelle.
Do you go to that convention?
I do.
Or you do?
I probably go, I don't go often. I went to Linea Pelle last year.
Oh yeah, Linea Pelle, right.
Years before that I went. But then they also have material conventions here in the United States. Linea Pelle has an offshoot here in New York. So you could go there and you could do tons of research. Usually each supplier of materials, whether it be leather, PU, exotics, textiles, they have books and swatches they can give you and you can take back with you. And then there's more sport-oriented material fairs also, and it's called the Northeast Material Show, which happens in Boston, and then they have the Northwest Show that happens.
Wow, so there's like a whole material circuit happening.
Yeah, it's awesome because that's how you build your library.
Mm-hmm. Nikki, how long did it take for you to feel like you developed enough skills as a designer? At what point in your career did you feel like you really had a handle on things?
Okay, first I'll say this: I'm still learning.
Always learning.
Always learning. I'm an eternal student, and I will be to the end of days. But when I felt like I had a really strong handle on designing shoes, probably when I started my own business, I think that was the ultimate confidence.
That's true. That's a very good point, right?
Yeah, because when I worked at Adi, I had all the resources around me. There were materials people, there was trend people, there were developers who did all these different actions, and I really just had to create really cool sketches. But I really knew the inner workings of a true performance shoe. But I didn't know anything brown shoes, fashion shoes, stilettos, black.
I remember all this.
Yeah, and finishings, burnishing, and so that's when I started to. When I started my twin brother Sean, I started my business with my twin brother Sean. We started to do fashion shoes, and that's I learned everything.
Yeah.
You were very critical.
Yeah, I work with you guys a little bit on that. Paul is asking if you get to own everything that you design. How does that work?
No,
no. Right. It's like the classic question that people ask fashion editors, like, do you get to keep all of the, it's like kind of a fallacy that like you can walk into a fashion closet and just like take something and just, I mean, there are people that do that. That's a whole other conversation, but right. You don't, it's not that you get to test drive the whole shoe wardrobe there at G3, right? No?
I do.
A little bit, but you don't, right.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I thought the question was, do you own like the intellectual right? You meant
no. Do you get to own what you designed? Do you get to like?
Absolutely. Sorry.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Good answer. Yeah. Zane, what's the hardest part? What's the hardest thing to get right when designing a shoe? Is there some sort of element to the design that's sort of the hardest thing to nail?
Yes. I think the hardest thing to nail is the balance between making a shoe interesting enough so that a customer will walk up on a shelf amongst, a cornucopia of fantastic designs and pick your shoe up. So to make it provocative and also simple enough so that it feels as if they can wear it in different occasions. It could be versatile. And it
right, they have to feel a connection. I mean, now we're really getting philosophical. They have to feel interested, but they also have to feel connected, like it's something they can't live without. Yeah, that's hard. I thought you were going to say comfort. Comfort's the hardest thing to nail, but maybe not. There are ways, there are tricks, tips and tricks, right, to make a shoe comfortable, I would think. And you're either a brand that does that, or a brand that doesn't. It's not as important for. Yeah.
That's it. It all depends on the values of the brand. If they take comfort serious.
Right. Kevin, of your previous positions, what has been your most favorite company to work for? Can you previous positions, I guess?
They're all different, but I'm just going to bring up two. There's two different ways I'm going to approach this. Adidas it holds such a special part of my being and heart, because it was my first job out of college. I learned how to design shoes at Adidas. Some of my best friends to this day are people that I worked with, and it's my first time traveling around the world is because of Adidas. Meeting and working with athletes and designing shoes for them, that could never be surpassed as far as like a true experience of learning the craft and industry. But then also, as far as being super reporting, being the creative director at G3 over multiple brands, it's always been a goal of mine to be a creative director, meaning that I've worked so hard and worked on such a broad range of products that now I have the confidence to not only look at shoes, but then also I can look at bags and jackets, and I could look at visuals from a campaign. I don't create our campaigns, but I know what feels right. Like and when you're a creative director, you're conscious for brand, right? So you might not be an expert, but you know what feels right, doesn't feel just
Yeah, it's probably like very
in the
it's
product.
probably very, very rewarding to exercise that muscle, I think is what you're saying, right?
Right. And your instincts, everything that you've garnered here now becomes a part of your decision, which usually has to happen fast. So I think it's been
Yeah. Do you have any designs that you haven't been able to launch that you wish you could? That was another question.
yes. Yes.
How many over the years have you just held on to and loved so much but couldn't get out there?
There's a lot, and it comes back to what I was just saying. I don't know the number, but there's, let's say, 50 that
Wow.
are great design, but if it doesn't fit for that brand and where
Had nowhere to go, right?
oh, I'm not just gonna send it off to someone. Hey, you guys should try it.
Make this. That's funny. I love this question from Carl. What stresses you out at work? I'm curious myself.
I would say the biggest thing that stresses me out is walking from the subway station to the front office on 4th Street. That
What?
yes. Oh my man, Times Square. That's where my office is. That's the most stressful part of my experience is that little 2-block commute, because it's just mayhem. People are just they're hurt.
True. I mean, it's true.
Sorry, but that's the most.
That part of the city is hectic, even as a native New Yorker, I have to say. This is a cool question too. Kin, do you connect with other brands and designers that have roots in Detroit like you do?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Like, do you know the Shinola people? Like, do you?
So there are designers and brands that, you know, I've admired from afar, whether it be Burn Rubber. They have a shop and they have a creative agency, and I'm linked through them through a mutual friend. And then like Shinola, for example, obviously I love what they've done. But as far as being connected in a way where, you know, we hang out and we solve problems or we collaborate together, no.
Another question was, how has your team collaboration and design process worked during the pandemic? We talk a little bit about this on the podcast.
Yeah.
You've had to do a lot of things to get product for meetings on Zoom like all the rest of us, but how are you collaborating with people, and how have you worked from afar when you're a designer and you're working with product? Like how is that working for you guys these days?
It's very difficult because we're in an industry where we work with samples.
Yeah.
And we take fit and comfort very seriously. So we're used to working that try on our tell us where it's hurting. It's very difficult to arrange coming in.
Wow, I didn't even think about that. Like all the test driving that needs to happen, right? All the
The second part of it, we have this stage called the confirmation sample. It's the final sample that you see and you approve to the factory and your entire team. This is the right, this is the right material. The stitch color is correct. The lace color is correct. The lining, and that's what you're off on. And it's very difficult to just be the person.
Oh, right. So you're very well trusted, right? When you're like,
Well,
you know, you're the creative director, so you've got to speak for everybody, huh?
I do, but I also think that a lot of my teammates don't want to have samples shipped to their house. So they're like, "Oh, Shane, you're the person."
That's right. That's right. That's funny. Ellie, what are you most proud of in your career?
I'm the most proud of times when I've inspired young kids who maybe have never seen someone that looks like them, that's from an area like from, and they now have connected to someone who has taken a talent, or an imagination, made it into a career. There's nothing more powerful than that.
When somebody realizes that there's this job and they can do that job too. When was the last time that happened? Do you have a story you can tell?
So, well, I mean, there's quite a few stories, but if I go back to Detroit for a minute, so my brother and I, we went back to the university. I've been back to the University of Michigan a few times.
Yeah, that's right.
And I've spoken there, and I've given workshops. But then we went to our middle school and our high school, and we talked about our journey and how we got to where we were, sitting in the same seat, in the same auditorium.
That is really powerful, and that had to be what an emotional experience. It's almost hard. It would be hard to shake that off for a while, right?
You can't. And then you receive emails about how profound the effects were and the emotion and the influence that you had. And I remember that happened to us when we were young. So, that's what I'm most proud of. But that's my inspiration going forward, is how can I be more of a conduit for connecting kids who, for whatever reason, don't have the resources that kids have, and inspire them to keep pushing and know that a better life, that their current situation isn't written already, or their life's, all the chapters that they can experience in their life is limitless. And so I feel like my then hasn't manifested so much more to do.
Yeah, changing lives and being of service, right?
Absolutely.
Cal, what are the most common mistakes young shoe designers make? Is there something you see time and again that might be just as annoying as that walk through Times Square?
I think young designers, I think the one thing that they struggle with is what I struggled with when I came out, and that is thinking that, or when a shoe that you've designed and it's gone all the way to the final stages with salesmen, and it doesn't make the collection, whether retailers didn't pick it up, or was the merchandising team and sales team said, we don't want to take this on the road, to not take that personal.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult because these are your babies. You know, you've been with them ever since you sketched it on a napkin. But your best ideas are in front of you. They're not the ones that you created. So don't be so connected and so emotional about when some of your designs don't make it all the way through.
Yeah, being attached. I mean, like any creative, you get really attached to your art, right?
Right. That's different.
Yeah. Right.
different
Dina, what brands are you inspired by right now?
brands.
Yeah.
So, okay, I'll just talk about some of the brands that I go to on a consistent basis, and I'm looking to see what they're up to. So there's a sneaker brand, a fashion sneaker brand out of Amsterdam called Filling Pieces. I think they're so dope. I remember coming across them a while ago, probably about 5 years ago, at this bread and butter convention, and I could tell.
Oh yeah, bread and butter, of course.
Yeah, but yeah, bread and butter was the bomb. So I would say Filling Pieces. Um, when
I
it
need to check this out. What do they look like?
they they're fashion sneakers, but they have very interesting soles and shapes, and they're really very provocative. Um, yeah, it's a cool brand. I've always been a fan of Adidas, but especially like Yeezy, like their brand is those are shoes I would personally wear. Um, I like shoes that are like simple in color, but then they kind of they feel robust. They feel like they
Right,
have
they have a good shape and silhouette to them.
they've they've redefined the shoe. There's a shape of the shoe
The
that you
silhouette.
the silhouette. When you draw the silhouette of that, if you had a shadow and you traced it, there's no way 10 years ago that would be a shoe that a classical shoemaker would say is possible.
Wow.
And last but not least, I've always loved Prada. I mean, Balenciaga, they do some really cool.
Oh, I have a crazy pair of shoes that I got.
Right. I love
Squared off toe. I mean, the shape of the shoe. I'm going to take a picture of it for you because you'll appreciate it. It's this crazy. I'm going to take a picture of it for you.
Please. I would love to see it. But Prada, I also think that they've always had the perfect balance of what I was talking about earlier, is having designs that are provocative, but then they pull it back, almost like that Chanel coat. When you think you're done with it, away. And I think that's how Prada has built their aesthetic, because they always have a little bit more of a simplistic point of view towards any particular trend that's happening.
Lynn, who have you learned from the most in your career? Did we talk about this already, or is there anybody else that you feel you've learned the most from?
Well, okay. Peter Moore, obviously, we talked about him, but I would say the two other people, at least when it comes to my career, I would say Paul Gaudio, who was my first boss at Adidas. He was the head of design. I still pick his brain to this day, just about brand purpose, and just pulling together an overall brand ethos. He's just awesome. But then there's a friend of mine named Kristen, who I worked with for years, and she's been the president of multiple brands. She was the president of SAS when she brought me in. She's been like a fantastic sounding board. But my conscience throughout my entire career has been my brother Sean. Like he's
That's
probably
right. We do talk about that on the podcast. We'll talk a lot about Sean. Yeah. And tell us why for the people. Well, you can listen to the podcast to hear a little bit more, but can you give us a little snapshot of why Sean?
Yeah.
How do you even sum that up, right?
Yeah, it's hard to sum up, but Sean has been there through every journey. He's been there through my times at Adidas and One, and then we started our business together. We spent 12 years through all the ebbs and flows and all the challenges and triumphs of running your own business. And so he knows where it all comes from. And he tells me the things he not only tells me what I need to hear, but he knows where my ideas and my perspectives come from.
Yeah, I was going to say he has a perspective on you that no one else could possibly have, right?
He knows
what makes sense.
More than that.
Celia, I'm curious about this too, because I don't know that we talked about this. Who would you love to collaborate with? Do you have like a little list of like in the perfect world?
Yes. Oh, give me a second. Okay. There's just one person I really want to collaborate with, and that is Tyler, the creator. Like
really?
Tyler, I think I've been thinking about this for years. I just love the fact that, similar to Frank Ocean, you can't put him in a box of like
A
what,
box, yeah.
but he's more than just a musician, you know, like he's also a creative. He's a designer. He's a maker, and he's constantly ahead of the game. And when I see him, I see someone that has the potential to be just as influential as someone like Pharrell, for example, when it comes to fashion, not just men's fashion, women's fashion, fashion in general.
Big ideas, big ideas.
Yeah, he's the one. Tyler.
All right, I'm going to make you tell a story, and we touch on this on the podcast, but we're going to immortalize it here. What's your biggest regret, Shane Ward? We talked about this.
Uh-oh.
Remember?
Oh, yes. It's the only one.
What's your biggest regret?
So, to everyone out there, my biggest regret to this day, it happened probably about almost 15 years ago, when Sean and I first started our brand, Detney by Shane and Sean. My brother met Tamara before me, Tamara, who's hosting this.
I thought we all met together at a party, but maybe okay.
Guys connected on a, you know, I was just.
That's right.
You and Sean connected on a deeper level. And so we brought you on as a creative consultant. And Tamara told me, and this was back before we had the brand figured out. And we were designing everything from 5-inch stilettos, sneakers, to sandals. And Tamara, I remember you styled a shoot for us. I don't know if you remember this. Lafayette Street in NoHo.
We did.
we had the motorcycle.
We were all over the streets.
And then we went upstairs in some loft, and there was this woman, this beautiful woman. She had this long, beautiful red dress on, and you put some sneakers on her. And I'm telling you that it just wasn't normal back then to see sneakers on a woman wearing a dress. I mean, this is back in 2004.
Maybe, yeah.
Right? What do you think? 3?
I moved from that apartment. I moved from that apartment in 2004, so it could have been around 2003 or 4.
Right.
Or 2. Could it have been 2? No.
2. I know the first photo shoot. So we started it in 02. So
that's right.
And you said Shane, and you probably said Shane and Sean, you guys should focus on sneakers. Like, you guys could be the go-to sneaker for
fashion sneaker,
up and down, like the fashion sneaker. Like, none of the fashion brands were doing it, and it didn't resonate.
What kind of heel did I tell you to put on the sneaker? A platform. Remember that? Remember I had this whole concept of like, put a platform on a sneaker.
Yes.
People are gonna go crazy for it.
Yes.
Remember?
When it wanted.
I just had to make you tell that story.
I wish someone forced you on our team and said,
"Well,
Mara's going to make a decision on how this is going to go forward."
I'm pretty sure we got into like a fight about it, because you know me, I'm pretty spirited, right? I wasn't gonna back down from that idea.
I know.
I just never made it.
If we listened to you, then instead of being upstate having this live chat, I probably would be in Saint-Tropez on a yacht. And all right, I gotta leave right now. My helicopter's about to.
Yeah. I've got to get back to.
Right.
Back to it. All right. As we wrap up, what are you doing for 4th of July?
4th of July, I'm going to have a nice, quiet weekend. I think
nice.
A friend or two may come over who have been taking, the shutdown very serious. We hook up every now and then. We have a nice social distancing barbecue. So I think that's what we're going to do this weekend. I was actually thinking about the first time maybe put ribs. I've never cooked ribs myself.
No, you haven't? Are you kidding me?
My entire family they've all done it, but I need to try it.
That's crazy. You have to do that.
I'm going to pick up some ribs tomorrow on my way.
Do that, and then you have to take a picture of your creation.
I will.
And if it's really good, we'll put your recipe on the site. Okay, last question. What else are you for me? What are you focusing on this summer?
This summer, I'm focusing on just evolving and growing what has started over the last 3.5 months. I'm going to continue with the Shoe Blossom series. So my goal is to finish the entire series, which would be 5 pieces. by the end of summer. And then I also want to have the first draft of my memoir by the end of summer.
We talk about that on the podcast. That's really great.
Right. And then everything clears up, I really want to go visit my mother in Cincinnati, and I want to go visit and see the rest of my family there, also out west.
Always.
And his family.
Always. You have enough creative space up there for 5 paintings and a book?
I could do this for the next 30 years, no problem.
Right. Okay, so the podcast is live. Not only is the podcast live, but there are about 12 of Shane's tastemaker recommendations, from books that inspire him to books that he reads every day to products that he uses. The podcast, as everyone knows, is available on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, and Stitcher. Shane, I will talk to you soon. I'll catch you later. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for having me.